Hello and welcome to Normal Island Live. I'm Curtis Daly and I'm joined by Ben Mclaine. Ben, you came in slightly last minute actually, so appreciate that. How are you? You should probably unmute yourself as well. This isn't a Zoom call, Ben.
It's a good fucking start, isn't it? Right.
Yeah, no.
Okay. So, first thing I've said on the show. I was just saying that I am really tired because I got up really early this morning, and that was a really bad mistake. I basically got up really early this morning to go to a jiu-jitsu class, and then I worked full day, and then I stepped in to do this at the last minute. I'm really hungry as well. Please don't bring up anything food related, or I might just pass out. But no, it's really good to be here. Thank you, Curtis, for inviting me on. And also, notice I'm wearing the Turn Left shirt. I'm repping the merch.
We actually both repping it.
Let's
white
go.
And black, yin and yang. No, light and dark. So you're the evil one tonight. I'm the good person, right?
Yes.
That's how we're doing it.
I mean, I thought that was always the way it was, but I'll let you go on.
All right. Well, coming up tonight, food. I'm just kidding. No, we are actually going to be talking about some really serious stories. I think it's going to be quite a sober analysis tonight. And I think you can probably guess what we will be covering. We are, of course, going to be talking about Jason Arday. In fact, we'll be covering Jason Arday for the first two stories. The first story, we're going to do more of an in-depth sort of analysis. And the second story, we're actually looking at Julie Hartley Brewer. Why are we talking about her? And why are we just talking about one tweet of hers? Well, I felt like it deserved its own story because what she said was so utterly grotesque, and we're going to use that as a platform to talk about the wider punditry class. But that's for later on. And then finally, we'll talk about the Reform Party are planning in government severe cuts to welfare. Now, remember to please like the stream, make sure you are subscribed, and if you want to support us, then you can go to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work. Of course, all of us are volunteers here at this organization. We don't get paid for the work we do, but one day that can happen. We work around our full-time jobs, as you heard from Ben there, jiu-jitsu, work, and then this. So it's quite tiring. We're doing scripts, we're doing video editing, we're presenting, and doing live shows all in between that. So if you could support us, just a couple of quids, then we'd appreciate it. You can also become a YouTube member for 99p. If you don't have any money, though, there's so much you can do. Please just share our content, clip this channel, put it all over Instagram and TikTok and Twitter. Tell your family and friends about us. So it's not just electronically with shares and retweets, but physically tell people that Turn Left exists, because we're only on 40,000 subscribers and there are millions of people that don't know about us, and we want to change that. But let's get on with the show and on to our first story. Jason Arday has been in the news for nearly 4 weeks. A month-long campaign that went beyond scrutiny became harassment and abuse, leading to the tragic news of his death. But the origins of the story are coming to light. A man named Nathan Coffners, he is too an academic, but what he advocates for is pure pseudo-science, especially race science. Here is Confus admitting to the reason as to why he broke the Arday story.
This and that sort of thing. Now, Arday was special. The reason Arday is getting a lot of attention is he took the plagiarism, which is fairly common in academia, too far. And he told these crazy lies about his personal life. And he had such an exalted position that the mismatch between the quality and the prestige was so enormous that there was a hook for a story. That was what was special about him. Not that he's a fraud, not that he's a worthless scholar. It's that there was a story. There's a basis for a news story that would capture people's attention. But, there are so many cases of people who are just like Arday, but, there isn't that kind of story potential. Well, maybe the lesson is this: what's happened if you don't give Coffness a job, right?
Yeah, you got your own ways to retaliate. What are you going to do, do you think? You going to finish your PhD? Or no, you've already finished it. You're just going to...
No, I finished a long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, so what are you going to do?
Well, I have the job currently, and I'm still waiting for the revolution to happen, and then
It's going to take a while.
Get another job. After the revolution, I'll be the the head of the Department of Eugenics and Race Science at Harvard.
That's the master race, everybody. It's clear what's going on here. A eugenicist and a proponent of the false race science myth was personally upset at the success of a black academic. Therefore, he concocted this story and fed it to the media, ending his remarks claiming he would be head of the Department of Eugenics and Race Science. He also claims that if meritocracy existed, there would be no Harvard black professors. Now, Confus was banking on the fact that the media would cover Jason Arday, but in a way, they wouldn't have with a white counterpart. As you can see from this Instagram post, these are examples of plagiarism. Sorry, I'll start that again. As you can see from this Instagram post, these are examples of plagiarism. And look who kept their jobs. According to The Observer, Confus is a Confus is a self-described race realist whose academic research focuses on the philosophy of biology and ethics. In February 2024, he published a post on Substack in which he claims that race is linked to intelligence and that without DEI initiatives, there will be no black academics at Harvard, and that under a colorblind system, black people would disappear from almost all high-profile positions outside of sport and entertainment. He called for a revolution against the DEI devil and for people to accept that talent is not distributed equally within or across groups. Now, why hasn't that had wall-to-wall coverage? A man with such grotesque views gets a complete pass from the media. In fact, back in 2024, The Times platformed his cheerleaders. Don't sack Cambridge academic for race views, say colleagues. And they've done a piece on what his colleagues say. Now that's funny. I mean, why didn't the mainstream media give as much coverage to Jason Arday's defenders? Now, if everything that had been claimed about Arday was true, the way the media covered him was still not proportionate. It was dripping in racism, from discussions around DEI to the sheer volume of articles, over 200 of them. However, much of the claims against Arday was simply not true. His supposed plagiarism featured across the entire media ecosystem, yet it turns out he was cleared. Entirely false allegations of plagiarism were made against Professor Arday and referred to 2 universities. Investigations have found no evidence whatsoever of wrongdoing. The relevant academic journals also found no basis for the claims. Now, there have been questions since about his academic work. However, if we had a media fit for purpose, with its near infinite resources and money, why wasn't the claim of plagiarism being unsubstantiated not also widely reported? Why didn't the media give just as much coverage to the filthy racist that is Nathan Kofnas, who started this entire saga based on his own admission this was a personal vendetta? If we care about balance, and the media says it does, with every accusation of plagiarism, why was there also not a counter-narrative to say, it's not being proved yet, it's unsubstantiated, and this is the person who's making these claims? Ben, the claim of plagiarism was the entire thrust of the story, yet it turns out that at least most of it wasn't even true. So was Jason Arday killed based on a lie?
I kind of disagree a little bit that the thrust of the story wasn't, was all about the academic plagiarism. I think there was more to it than that. But I think he was killed based on a lie, but that wasn't about questions of honesty or plagiarism. It's not that Jason Arday wasn't like a flawed individual, but rather the lie is that he was uniquely obtuse and that his ascension was almost entirely to do with his racial background. I think that is the lie that that got him killed. I think the things he was advocating for in his academic career have fairly good like academic backing. Just for example, his PhD thesis was on the benefits of like less hierarchical student teacher mentoring and reflective practice. And it does seem to show that this is like a positive thing, and it's something that student teachers, as in people training to be teachers, by the way, this does seem to help with the overall kind of like outcome of making more rounded and analytical students. It's all kind of good stuff, and in lots of ways that's sort of like just a positive in itself. Like even if the plagiarism accusations were true, the things that he was advocating for are well grounded and seem to be well backed up, and that is one thing to bear in mind. Plagiarism is something like academics do have to be strict on, and unless you've seen it from the like academic perspective, you won't understand just how strict they are. And I am inclined to believe on the academic stuff, if they say that he fell within the standards, he probably fell within the standards. And it's worth bearing in mind as well that there is a drought of original work in the humanities due to like a lack of research funding, particularly since the austerity years began in like 2010. And this does usually lead to multiple references and citations being made to the same like idea or set of ideas. I do have to say it like it is. I think there are things in his personal life that he did lie or exaggerate about, and with some of his personal achievements, but it just doesn't justify this response from the press. Now, News Corp, who analyze they do macro analysis of the press. They're a great organization. I thoroughly recommend checking them out. News Corp found that there were 249 press articles that had been written about him in a period of less than 3 weeks. We're talking about a guy who maybe told some tall stories, right? The Telegraph alone published 50 articles on him. The Telegraph has roughly 16 million unique viewers in terms of people reading its website each month. So that's sort of 16 million people reading 50 articles on him, which is just an absurd amount of pressure for like one person to take on. And there's a contrast that I want to bring up actually, because I think it is actually important. And it shows that it's kind of not about plagiarism. Matt Goodwin. Do you remember Matt Goodwin? Matt GPT, as he's now known. He wrote a book full of AI bullshit. He also uses his academic credentials to lift him up. But the Telegraph wrote one article about him. Like one article about that book, about his plagiarism. I guess it could either be seen as plagiarism. I would regard AI as plagiarism, but that's a personal opinion. His use of AI, shall we say. And 3 more articles they published that sort of mentioned that AI dishonesty in passing of Matt Goodwin's. So generously, 4 articles were written about Matt Goodwin, who is like a far more prominent figure with far more power and there's far more wealth in what he does. But there was only 1 article about him specifically and 4 in total from the Telegraph. So it clearly isn't about like plagiarism. Like they don't really care much about plagiarism. And bad citation in supposedly academic work, right? That's clearly not it. It also isn't about honesty. Keir Starmer, like probably the most dishonest prime minister we've ever had, serial liar, but no one kind of cares. It's not about lying or about plagiarism. It's about the belief that a black academic could only be in his position through false elevation. It aligned with their worldview. That's what it was about. That's why the Telegraph was willing to publish so many articles about it. It wasn't to do with, to do with a genuine concern about like the quality of academia in Cambridge. No, absolutely not. One of the things it highlights is we do need to majorly get the press in this country under control. And it always reminds me a little bit of talking about. I'm always going to bring Nazi Germany into every conversation. Apologies, but I am, because I'm going to say that I once asked my lecturer about, like, okay, so in terms of standing up to the Nazis, who could do what? And he was like, well, that depends heavily on who you were, because the crime in a fascist society, in a dual state society, as Ernst Frankl would say, in a state where there is a normative law for most people and a prerogative law for those with privilege, um, the crime is not just the crime. And in this case, the crime isn't dishonesty. The crime is dishonesty plus identity. And without those two things, it just doesn't take off in the same way. Apologies, I'm waffling a bit. Go on.
I want to slightly push back a bit, but I think it also could be a problem with my framing the question. I do think plagiarism plays a role, but I suppose the way I asked the question was it was the main story. I think what I meant to say was I think it was the thrust in which it was the thing that lit the fuse. I think we know that the larger point about Jason Arday was the racism, which is that as Kofnas was saying, this person could possibly be there without some sort of help from insert DEI, insert wokeness. I mean, the entire smoke and fire from the media was purely racism. It absolutely was. And it was his race was used to attack the idea of racial equality or policies that we can do to improve society, to get more representation in certain aspects of society. But I think that the plagiarism aspect was the thing that lit the fuse, because it's a serious accusation. And they needed to use plagiarism to then jump off and then start making spurious accusations. Now, of course, if plagiarism had nothing to the story, I don't doubt that this still would have been covered if he'd lied about, a marathon. But I think that they managed to create, I think they managed to have this story permeate across 4 weeks because they kept pushing down the idea of plagiarism. And again, people take that seriously. Now, I do take your point when you say about, well, Matt GPT, he technically plagiarized in his book, and there was only a couple of stories on that. Where I would slightly push back on is I agree with you that using AI to write shit is absolute plagiarism. The wider media doesn't see it like that. I don't think the media particularly cares about AI. One, I don't think a lot of the media really understand it. And two, I don't think they think that whether it's generative AI is stealing other people's artwork or whether it's just not doing proper research. But then again, I mean, I'm sort of even conflicting with myself. I think you're absolutely right insofar that they could have done a full week press coverage of Matt Goodwin, but they didn't. And obviously, he's white and he's right wing. There's also that as well.
Was he? Was it before or after? I can't actually remember. Was it before or after he lost the Gorton and Denton by-election? Was that?
Good question. I think
I can't actually remember because that is.
Also it might have been. I know it's really close. I think was it just before, or just after? I mean, that had nothing to do with his election loss, obviously. Although to be fair, though, even GB News for a while took it quite seriously. In fact, GB News really went for him, and our friend of the show, Andy Twells, did a complete number on him.
He did. It was pretty good. It was just after, but either way, I do think that the fact that he was a political candidate, he was clearly somebody who Reform were willing to put forward as a potential candidate, maybe one of 5 MPs in a future governing party. And the lack of criticism that he received compared to the criticism that Jason Arday received for, I'd say as much bullshit and as much consequential, at the very least, bullshit. In fact, I'd maybe even argue that Matt Goodwin's bullshit did a lot more harm because
it absolutely did, didn't it?
Yeah,
because Matt Goodwin, he wrote an entire book basically demonizing immigrants, right? And that has a huge issue in society. If you've got some inaccuracies or you lied about marathon runs, that clearly doesn't have the same level of power in society or shape the narrative. It's 5-8. I do want to ask my second question though. No, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's it's really important to get into. But I think this is also a very important question. Is that Arday had autism, and 1 in 4 people have attempted or thought about suicide. So my question to you is, do you think the media and their lack of safeguarding this is actually representative of wider society. And on this specific issue, it's actually not just the media to blame, it's society as a whole, the way in which we treat people with autism.
Ableism in society is a real problem, and I think there might be something to that. Jason Arday did clearly struggle, like he was non-verbal throughout like much of his childhood, and if I remember correctly, those stories in some of the stories in the Guardian that I read about him were corroborated by friends that he had in his school days. So I think his struggle with autism genuinely real, and I just I think that the general like ableism probably takes a sort of a backseat. It's a bit more subtle. I think it is present, but I think it's a bit more subtle than the like racial element being present, because DEI, people always think of it as like a racial thing, even though DEI is absolutely what Nigel Farage is doing, for example, when he's talking about like needing to talk to working class people, or the everyday man down the pub. DEI, it's he's speaking to particular identity groups to try and to try and speak to their struggles. In a way, it is kind of the it's identity politics at the very least. But I do think there's a wider question here, though, that there needs to be a reinforcement of the right to privacy and limits put on the number of articles that the press can publish about a private individual. So, for example, a publication can publish 2 articles, say, about a teacher before they're required to stop, but you might allow them to publish 10 articles on a national political figure. But ultimately, these are any question about the press. We fucking need Leveson too. We really do. Any question about the press is a question about the concentration of power. And that really is what needs to be broken up, so that like vicious little wankers like Confus can't use it to take advantage, knowing that people like Jason Arday will receive so much more scrutiny than similarly placed people who have committed the exact same transgressions, or even worse transgressions. And use that to like destroy their entire lives and make them representative of groups, because there's so many black academics in the UK who are now going, well, my work might come under the same level of scrutiny, and I don't want to draw the attention of the press, which only worsens the problem. But this is what like awful little wankers like Confus want, because they want people like black people, they want minority groups to step away from putting themselves out there. It is sort of a macro intimidation tactic used against minority groups to artificially shape the world as they want it to be. And frankly, Confus shows his own intelligence with his statements. I can't stand it when people like that, and he just looks like such a wanker. But also, I can't stand it when people like that, when ugly little frauds like that get involved and make the lives of minority groups measurably worse on a national political stage by manipulating our extremely corrupt media. Something needs to be done about the concentration of media power.
Yeah. I think you're right to say that like the ableism aspect was very, very subtle. And this is not again any excuse for the media, by the way, but I do think it's definitely an issue of wider society, because ableism is very individualized, invisibilized. Like racism isn't. Yeah. There's obviously subconscious racism that we don't immediately pick up on, but we talk about racism a lot. Ableism isn't, and I can actually see a lot of people rolling their eyes when we say Jason Arday had autism too, and that could have led to some of the difficulties he's had. A lot of people are like, oh, what else have I got? We've all got something, and I think that's a knee-jerk reaction. That's a societal problem. I think that's not excuse the media. I'm gonna move on to our next story, but it is sticking with Jason Arday. Now, when it was announced that Jason Arday had died, many in the media quickly deleted past articles and comment pieces, embarrassed by their own words prompted by the news. Yet there are some, utterly ghoulish, inhumane, and downright disgusting individuals who thought it was appropriate to actively mock his death. This is what Julie Hartley Brewer said on Twitter. I'm pretty sure Jason... Sorry, the text is really small. I'm pretty sure Jason Arday's huge book advance will be enough to cover his funeral costs. Give your money to a more deserving cause. Now, when Owen Jones called out her repugnant comment, she doubled down. So he screenshots her and says, "These monsters don't just walk among us, they present national radio shows." And she says, "It was only a matter of time, wasn't it?" Now, I'm not really sure what she's referring to in terms of matter of time. I guess she meant if Owen Jones was going to attack her, but no self-reflection, no regret. Although it's been revealed what Brewer does in her spare time when she's not insulting passed away individuals. Breaking. Radio shock jock Julie Hartley Brewer takes a break from drowning puppies in her bath to revel in a man's suicide. I mean, to be fair, she does look like fucking Cruella de Vil. The difference is, Cruella is a saint compared to Heartless Sewer. Now, the media response to Jason Arday has, of course, been another case study, rather, in the need for media reform. Yet tax expert Dan Needle decided to interject with an untimely and, quite frankly, utterly moronic point. It's very confusing to see people on the left calling for more regulation of the press. All hard and soft law regulating the press has been used and is used by the wealthy and powerful to silence their critics. Yes, Dan, because it's the wealthy who use regulation to protect themselves and not the wealthy owning the press who can put out lies and misinformation whenever they please due to poor and weak regulation. I mean, Ofcom have really nailed GB News, haven't they? I mean, maybe if we abolished Ofcom, the media would be better. A really, really stupid point. And to make it in the midst of the pylon and subsequent death of Jason Arday is outstanding. Ben, I want to get your response from those like Hartley Brewer. She and many others claims that this was all about media scrutiny. This wasn't a harassment campaign. Yet she literally undermined herself by reveling in his death. I mean, scrutiny, it's not really, is it?
No, I don't think it's I don't think it's scrutiny. I think there's a lot to be said about the idea that you just have to bear in mind that so much of the right wing are just demon people who want to maximize death and suffering, and they bring a lot of ad revenue in the attention economy as a result of doing that. And that is, if you want to understand Julie Hartley Brewer, that's the perspective she's coming at this from. It's her income, right? When Anne Widdecombe died, she made a point of objecting when a trans woman, it's not significant that it was a trans woman, but a trans woman was investigated by the police after she made social media posts about Anne Widdecombe. She is consistent. Like, Julie Hartley Brewer is consistent. But it's so that she can continue to make money through outrage clicks. That's her business model, right? And I think it's always got to be sort of looked at through that view, and looked at through that understanding. And so much of the the post-mortem cruelty that's directed at Jason Arday reminds me of the George Floyd "he was no angel" response from Republicans in response to the Black Lives Matter movement. When the Black Lives Matter movement, said, look, George Floyd was murdered, the response from Republicans and from the American Republicans and from the right wing was, well, he was no angel. And it's like, no one claimed he was an angel. Nobody claims that like Jason Arday didn't do anything wrong ever in his life. That he didn't make either mistakes. He didn't when we're talking about crossing the line in terms of summarizing and plagiarism and all that stuff. And it seems to me that he did exaggerate some things in his personal life, maybe even lied about some things. And that's fine. Do you know what I mean? The same way that George Floyd having like a drug habit, it's fine. It's not a death sentence, and nobody who turns around and tells you, well, he was no angel, is being honest about what they're saying. They're saying, because I can find some small criticism of this person who fits in a minority group, I'm going to use that to say I was always right. It was always those people, and my worldview is still fully intact. And I really do think that the left has to be careful to measure both the quantity and quality of accusations of the news. And I think so much of the mistake that the that left analysis made was looking purely at the quality of the claims about Jason Arday, while avoiding the quantity and whether or not that was balanced in response to what was going on. There was almost sort of very little discussion until after his death about the quantity, and I think it is that quantity and quality. And with regards to the quantity, News Corp are such a good resource for that, because they are constantly running these analysis of moral questions about our press that look at the stories in the meta and analyze the language, but also analyze the output of the press. So if you can, go and check out the campaigns that News Corp are running in response to Jason Arday's death, because it is well worth checking out.
I think what you're talking about here is the perfect victim fallacy, which is that in order for people to defend someone a victim of a crime, they themselves have to be perfect. And I'm glad you brought up George Floyd, because obviously I spoke about Jason Arday on the weekend, and I used the same analogy, which is that, you know, many on the right were like, why are you celebrating this man? He's a terrible person. He's committed crimes, etc., etc. And it's like, but the point isn't that he needs to be a perfect victim. The point is that the police murdered him. And we don't think that you should be spared from murder if you're a perfect human being. No, you shouldn't be murdered regardless. And I think it's very similar in the way in which people speak about Jason Arday. Now, of course, the severity of the imperfectness is different. I mean, George Floyd did commit crimes. Arday hasn't. But that's the thing. It's like you can't, apparently, according to right-wingers, you can't have a level of empathy if they're not perfect. No one's perfect. Absolutely no one's perfect. I want to talk to you about Dan Needle's point, because I think it's actually relevant, right? He claims that media regulation has somehow helped the wealthy, and us lefties who want stronger regulation, we're wackos, we're crazy, we're stupid. But aren't our regulators incredibly poor?
Yeah, obviously our regulators, both in terms of like media regulators and press regulators, are incredibly poor, and the IMA has been criticizing them for some time, and they're a much better place to run those criticisms. When it comes to Dan Needle, I just think he's the wrongest man ever. Like I really do, and I think I said this to you, Curtis, at the time when you sent me the tweet, and I was like, yeah, this guy's just like professionally wrong. So Dan Needle's basis for saying this was largely the Carter Ruck letter. Carter Ruck are, I think, the legal company that Jason Arday or somebody related to him, not related, but like not related as in family related, but in his circle, sent to stop I think it was a journalist running a story about Jason Arday. And Dan Needle's argument is basically that this letter and the firm itself acted as a conduit to intimidate mainstream outlets into silence, and then that led to a backlash. But I kind of think this argument doesn't really make sense when 249 articles were written about like just this one guy. Like, I don't understand how that really, even arguing that there's a backlash, I don't think that proves that the power is where you think it is in that scenario. I think the lack of regulation of the press is it's a major problem in this country, and the sort of like inconsistency of the press as well. There's another academic whose name keeps coming up. It's gone from my head. William O'Reilly, and was a Cambridge professor, and he was found guilty of plagiarism. I'm doing this off the top of my head. I think it was about 12 pages or something of plagiarism in one of his academic works. He plagiarized some of his undergraduates, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I know because I remember the only thing that was written about him, according to News Cord, was the Financial Times wrote one article about him, just one article. It's very clear that the press aren't too regulated. They're not regulated enough because they will hound a black academic like literally to his death, while ignoring a very similarly situated white academic. And I just think that the inconsistencies are so glaring. They're so glaring.
You know how when like the Sun or another newspaper puts out a huge lie and smear, and they know they're lying, and they do it on purpose, and then when they have to retract it, what they do is they put an apology in like a tiny little font on page 19 at the bottom and say, "Oh, we apologize for this." That's something in which the corporate media know they have to do, but what matters is the lie got out there in the first place, right? Now, to me, if you're going to splash a front page story and it's objectively a lie, I think that the regulator should force that same newspaper to do a front page apology, and it has to have the same amount of reach and prominence as the original lie. But they don't have to do that. That is a perfect example of why our regulators are so weak. And Dan Needle seems to think, no, the rich are using regulators to shut down dissent. No, if we had good regulation, and you know that one I suggest, which you have to put an apology on your front page, right? That would do a lot to do to fix the issues of corporate media, and that's the type of regulation. And I know it's crazy to me. I think we're gonna park that there, if I'm honest. I think it's 8:15, and we are going to go on to our final story. But before we move on, it's 2026, and we really want this year to be big for Turn Left. We want to be more ambitious than last year and to really put us on the map. We would like 2026 to be the year where we can have a studio. We have a part-time studio, and for our contributors to be paid for the work we do. Your support over the years has been amazing, and we are ready to take this to the next level. We rely on small donations, so if you want to be part of a media organisation that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. You can also become a YouTube member for 99p. Let's go to our final story. The so-called Anti-Establishment Reform Party is planning to implement an establishment punch-down policy, attacking poor and disabled people. Robert Jenrick announced they would slash a whopping £50 billion a year from disabled people and foreign nationals. And this is what Robert Jenrick said in a speech, standing in front of a slogan that says, "Ending Benefits Britain."
A reform government will introduce a welfare to work scheme that will require long-term benefits claimants who are fit to work to provide 20 hours a week of work for their community, organised by their local council. They'll work to clean up high streets and parks, to beautify neglected places, to carry out minor repairs, to staff libraries and community centres, to perform many other tasks from the list that we've published today. We'll also embrace local charities and community groups and ask them to help us and take part. If claimants refuse to participate or fail to show up, they'll face penalties. Let me speak very plainly. If people who are capable of work refuse, then they'll get nothing. That's fair. How can it be that one family on a street with working parents strive, work hard, only to fund the lifestyle of another who chooses not to bother to work at all, who isn't even really looking for a job? This isn't just an aberration, a small number of very isolated cases to be dismissed as a rounding error. It's an epidemic that's been allowed to take hold across our country and has now spread into a full-blown national crisis. My message today, for those taking everyone else for mugs, under a reform government, it's going to stop. A reform government will introduce...
What he said there was a complete utter lie. He says, it's not just a rounding error, it's a national crisis. That is categorically untrue. Okay, according to the government's own data, right, benefit fraud amounts to like 0.3%. It is quite literally a rounding error, but he's fucking lying to propagandize to the people that fraudulently claiming benefits is everywhere and we must crack down. But what Generic is proposing there is a policy of slave labor, forcing people to work for less than the legal minimum wage. But notice, right, that they want to cut disability benefits, 20 billion specifically, yet there he is talking about forcing people into underpaid labor. So is he suggesting he wants to force disabled people to do such tasks? I mean, the point of disability benefits is that we as a society pay for some who cannot work. Therefore, they can still have access to basic needs. But not all disabled people on welfare don't work. Many do, and personal independent payments have been a lifeline for many, which of course is being targeted by reform. The party said the plans were aimed at reducing the welfare bill by a quarter, with personal independence payments replaced by another cash benefit that will be restricted to the only gravely and severely challenged. Yet, who judges the gravely ill and severely challenged? Reform will. And their criteria of severely challenged will be different to others. In fact, for decades, the DWP had a different idea. They allowed thousands to die because they declared many to be fit for work when they weren't, leading to their deaths. With reform at the helm, you can expect even harsher criteria. But policy aside, politically, this seems like a really odd move, given that reform constituencies have a high amount of PIP claimants. So if you see here, 15.3% of working age people are on PIP. That's the Clacton constituency. Nigel Farage. Then you've got Sarah Pochin, Lee Anderson, Richard Tice, Robert Jenrick, Rolla Braverman. The list goes on. So they represent areas of people who are desperate and who are vulnerable. Now, Lady Cunningham hosted LBC today and got a taste of the backlash.
I do not agree with getting rid of PIP. I am a cancer patient.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I work part-time. Metastatic breast cancer, PAL-B2 gene carrier, unfair dismissal protection goes, I'm out of a job. I'm out of my home. I'm 57 years old. Got a palliative care husband, 15 different disabilities. He worked for HMRC, government kicked out 10 years ago. Get rid of his PIP. No trips to hospital. He's got liver failure. He's blind. He's epileptic. I can't even get a council property despite having the over-allotted points. How the hecking hell am I supposed to vote for reform?
I'm so sorry.
Hell, what's reform going to do for me? Nothing.
Elizabeth, I hear you. And we genuinely care about the people in vulnerable positions like you. It's why we got into politics. And it's not about cutting benefits from people who actually need it. It's about telling those who could work that they should work to protect exactly the benefits for the vulnerable that need it. And I'm so sorry that you're dealing with cancer. It's a very tough time. And you're in Haringey. I'll come and see you, Elizabeth. I'd love to.
I do not agree with...
It's not about cutting benefits from those who actually need it, so she says. But it is. Because even if it's unintentional, right? This is the natural result of means testing. As I mentioned earlier, the DWP has allowed thousands to die. The reality is we have a choice. A comprehensive welfare with a small number of people who fraudulently claim, or crack down on welfare to root out the small number of frauds and kill tens of thousands in the process. I know which one I pick. This is what Isabel Oakeshott had to say about welfare cuts. Can't wait to see how many fit and well universal credit claimants suddenly find work rather than be forced to clean the streets in return for their benefits. Under reform, no more something for nothing. Long overdue. Labour first proposed this under Blair, but chickens. They won't suddenly find work. They die. One of the major reasons for the deaths of 330,000 people were from austerity, and the main driving force was cutting welfare. Now, all of this is performative cruelty. This isn't about saving money. The biggest welfare expenditure is the state pension. With graphic 15, we can get out quickly. Brilliant, thank you. The biggest welfare expenditure is the state pension. If this was truly a cost-cutting exercise, then why don't the party look at pension reform, such as removing the triple lock? Could it be that their base are just older people? But this entire conversation about the entire policy of cutting benefits, which every party has done for decades, is a completely pointless exercise. It doesn't get people into work. So Denmark has higher LFPR, which means labour force participation rates, than the UK. 82.5% of working age people in Denmark are in work, compared to 79.1% in the UK. But this is despite the fact that Denmark generally has more generous welfare payments. There is no correlation to high benefits and high worklessness, something the entire political establishment falsely claims. And in Denmark, the precise opposite is literally true. Ben, we can remember a time early in this year, maybe last year, Reform were on 30% in the polls. For a time, they pretended to court left-wing economic policy. They said they were against the two-child benefit cap. They said they supported steel nationalisation. Then they fully lent into austerity. And as you saw from the statistics of the constituencies, as you saw from that caller towards Leila Cunningham, a lot of people are not going to be happy with these benefit cuts. Why are they doing this?
Well, these are the same fuckers that tried to claim that they were, part of Alarm Clock Britain. They were there for Alarm Clock Britain. Well, the carers who get up to look after their relatives and have to claim carers allowance and depend upon their relatives' PIP allowance, they set their alarm clock in the morning. They get up in the morning as well. They need to survive as well, and there's so much wrong with this story, but it goes so much deeper than just Reform UK. It's part of our sort of national mythos now, as much of our like Arthurian legends, Merlin and King Arthur and Robin Hood are part of our national mythos. The idea that people are falsely claiming benefits is so much part of our national mythos. If you talk to somebody, genuinely, if you talk to the average person about benefits and benefit claimants, they are convinced that they know somebody who has a flat screen TV, has a PS5, and is living the high life because they are on benefits, and they are like they're very convinced that that person is fraudulently claiming benefits, even though there are almost always things going on there that like there's more to those stories so often. Not saying that fraudulent benefit claimants don't exist. They absolutely do. But the way that it is perpetuated and it's in our national mythos, so much of this is to do with the press. It's the same press that led to Jason Arday's death. It's the same press that's led to the death of so many people who depend upon the state to survive. Just to give an example, the BBC reported this story about Reform, and do you know what the headline was? The headline that they published on X, on Twitter? Reform UK plan would overhaul welfare system with £50 billion in savings. And people rightly pointed out that accepts the framing that Reform can find £50 billion in welfare savings, and it also softens it as an overhaul. The reality is, and the BBC have a responsibility to put this sort of stuff in their headlines. PIP in total is £25 billion. To the person, Leila Cunningham saying, well, we won't take it from people who don't need it. How do you subtract 50 billion from 25 billion and not take it from the genuine PIP claimants? That does not make any sense. That doesn't make any sense at all, just on a basic level. But this is the thing. Like you say, a pension is the biggest cost on the welfare budget, but no one will touch it. Least of all Reform, who just want the Untermenschen and the asocials, the asocials, to suffer because it gets their base going, right? It's what excites them. It's what gets them out of bed in the morning. It's what floats their boat. But obviously, like, the state pension should be indexed to wage growth so that everybody is incentivized to vote in each other's interests. This is part of keeping us divided. And if working people can't live, pensioners should not be able to live either. Our social contract should bind us together. It's so much to do with the radicalization of the press. It's to do with the radicalization of the over 65 specifically, because this is a policy designed to placate the over 65s. It's of course also designed to placate employers with the idea, hey, you might get some workfare, what's effectively slave labor out of this. But it's so much to do with the over 65s, the radicalization of the over 65s, and the idea that people are just sitting around all day. This national mythos, it needs to end. We need to find a way to destroy this myth that people just sit around on benefits all day, and that is a large part of what's going on, and instead talk about the horrendous state of town centres where businesses can't afford to get started because they can't afford to rent space in the town centre because corporate landlords price them out, and they're priced out. They then, if they're lucky enough to get a spot, there's not enough velocity of money in the economy, by which I mean there's not enough people with spare cash in their pockets to be able to afford the products that people are producing. So those businesses stay there for maybe a year if they're lucky, and then the business just collapses again, and they have to, they have to sell out and sell their business, often to a big corporation, and then the big corporations just get more money. It's all linked to that fundamental problem. Like, that is what's driving unemployment, not people on welfare. And like you say, people on welfare sitting around, it just doesn't bear out with the statistics that we've got from Nordic countries where they have more generous welfare systems. They also have stronger union rights as well, but they have more generous welfare systems, and yet you don't see the levels of unemployment that we're seeing in this country. We're seeing these levels of unemployment because we chose to fuck ourselves with austerity instead of actually investing in the economy when interest rates were low, and actually turning the economy around. You don't cut your way to growth. To put it really simply, and I was thinking about this, I think I was watching an episode of Question Time, and I was thinking about, okay, what would I say if I was sat in this seat? And one of the major things that I want to get across to the audience is, can we please end this fucking myth that the way that you grow in, the way that you grow an economy is by cutting it to the bone, and then magically it will start to work. Efficiency savings, all this bullshit. There's so much bullshit. And by the way, it will see a rise in crime, because if people can't afford to live, then it is just a fact that people will turn to crime in order to survive. And I don't mean that in a direct way of like, oh, they'll start stealing bread and stuff. You will see that, but also you'll see gangs start to infiltrate communities because, hey, there are so many more people who are unemployed and willing to run these drugs to the next location than there were a year ago, because so many people are unemployed and so many people just need money, and they need money to survive, especially if you're somebody who has a vulnerable looks after a vulnerable person. You're a carer for a vulnerable person, and so it limits your employment opportunities. Yeah, of course that you're going to take anything you can to get money. I always say that the story of Peaky Blinders, people watch Peaky Blinders and they're like, oh, they're fucking cool, Tommy Shelby, fucking them up, the whole like razor blades in the hat thing, and it's like, you guys missed the message. The message there was, if you let communities rot and you leave communities to rot, then you allow like crime to take over those communities, and those communities aren't governed by democratic consensus. They're governed by crime and by gangs. I could say so much more on this, but I'm going to leave it at that because I'm aware of the time.
I mean, the anti-benefit propaganda has been the most damaging thing to society, because at the beginning, what you said is the average person who thinks that people are just fraudulently claiming or sitting on their ass is so widespread. It almost feels impossible to overcome that narrative. And this is something from Blair. This is Blair's legacy, which is very funny how, for reform, they think the establishment started with Tony Blair. Okay. I would say that actually the political establishment, I mean, it's kind of a loose term in a way, if you think about it. Like, where did the political establishment start? I mean, it didn't start anywhere, did it? But I would say like the consensus of politics started in the 80s under Margaret Thatcher. But, you know, Yusuf and Farage would say, oh, it started under Blair. Yet the irony here, though, is that they're parroting exactly what Blair did. Remember, it was under New Labour that pushed the idea of welfare queens. So we've had this 20-year-long propaganda machine, if not a bit longer, of telling people that actually there are too many people on benefits. And the problem is we keep cutting and cutting and cutting, and there's no more to cut. There's nothing left to cut. You're right as well in saying about how the BBC, they're framing by saying, oh, these are welfare savings. It's very, very hard, though, to counter-narrative that, to offer a counter-narrative, because the very simplistic argument is too many people on benefits, we're spending too much money, let's just cut it. Now, of course, there's no such thing as savings when it comes to austerity, because where are the savings being made? Sure, you might spend less on welfare, but when there's less people in work, when there's less people with opportunity, when people have less money, the economy shrinks, so it actually costs more. For example, means testing actually costs more because you have to design a system in which you decide who gets what. That's actually very costly. When it comes to the DWP, like 90% of the outcomes where they declared so many people fit for work, they went to court and found that actually they were incorrect in their assessment. That all costs money. That no one's actually making any savings here. The deficit goes somewhere else. And when you cut benefits, the deficit is on the rest of society, everybody. But that's not important to people like Reform. They don't particularly understand that, but they also don't really care. And by the way, just to finish off, if these right-wing parties truly cared about employment, but also believe that everyone should sort of do their bit, because I'm not against the idea of the collective idea that we all do our bit, whether it's, you know, cleaning roads, where it's bin pickups, litter pickering. I think that's quite good, isn't it? But the way in which they see it is, oh, we're going to force people to do it on benefits, okay? Well, actually, if they really care, then why wouldn't they support a federal jobs guarantee? Something which I think would fundamentally change this economy, which is that as a guaranteed job for you, provided by the state, but it's also high quality job, so it's got really good benefits and it's highly paid. So if you want someone to say, do you know what, let's go do a bin run because the council's not doing it properly, or let's go clean the streets, offer someone a 35, 40 grand a year job doing it. That solves the problem. You get someone into employment and they got enough money to contribute to the economy, and it has the better effect. It stops the race to the bottom, because once you had a federal jobs guarantee, the market and private companies have to then compete with a £40,000 a year job rather than a £200 week benefit scheme. Like, this would transform the economy, but they're not interested in that.
It's always your guarantee, your insurance against your employer. If you can turn around and say, well, I can survive for a bit on unemployment benefits. I can survive, so I don't have to take your abuse. And by the way, this abuse can be extreme. In some situations, this can be literal sexual abuse, you know, that some employers perpetrate when they are in positions of extreme power disparities. And people forget, like, that welfare, that is your insurance against your employer. Like, every single time, it's worth bearing in mind that is your insurance against your employer. Don't knock it, because you might need it someday. And in a world where the AI is rising, more and more people are probably going to end up on some sort of welfare support and going, oh, it's not there for me when I need it. Why is it not there for me when I need it? It's because of these sorts of narratives, right?
Well, I just want to address someone's comment. Obviously, we don't have a federal Britain. The federal jobs guarantee is a thing, and it's being proposed in America. Obviously, I'm just calling for a British version, maybe just a British jobs guarantee. But I think that part of it is a clever way in which to support the big business, because obviously, if you have a very poor welfare state, very low paying welfare state, then what you're doing is basically saying that, well, you're coerced into low paid jobs, right? I mean, capitalism has a coercive nature. Like, you are literally coerced into working. To counter that narrative of the coercion of capitalism and markets is to make sure there's a safety net. So if we were to have far higher benefits, then yeah, because I'm absolutely okay with someone saying, do you know what? Right, I fucking hate this job. You treat me like shit. I'm going to go on benefits for 2 months. Maybe I need to, reskill, learn something else, but I can survive on that. And that actually means that, one, you have more freedom to choose which job you're in. I don't like this idea that everyone has to be in some kind of employment. Well, what about you working for minimum wage and it's, socially useless job? I mean, is that good for society? No, it's not. But also it forces businesses to compete for that labor. So I'm fully in favor of having like a benefit system which is very well paid, and people actually have a bit more of a choice, and we don't penalize these people, because it would tell businesses, do you know what? Get your fucking act together. Offer good quality, high-paid jobs to get someone off benefits into these jobs.
Sorry, just
okay,
on
go on. Quickly
the
finish
issue.
off.
The idea that capitalism benefits from this is to some degree true. There is some truth in the idea that capitalists, the bosses, benefit, and you might think, oh well, that means that businesses are benefiting. Not necessarily.
No, yeah, of course.
I think that there are socially beneficial forms of like capitalism. Like, I'm anti-capitalist, but I recognize that a flower shop opening up in my town center, or I don't know, a bakery opening up in my town center, even if it's a capitalist business, I recognize that is so much more beneficial than those places remaining empty to benefit benefit the capitalist class, so to speak. And the idea of having people who look after our communities and who are paid to look after our communities properly, and properly investing in communities, making sure that, I was in Spain recently. Spain, they actually clean the streets. Like, you actually see them going out. Like, I'd come out of spend a night in a bar, come out, and the ground would be wet, and I'd be like, it definitely hasn't rained. Not in this weather. It hasn't rained in ages, and it's because they go around and they actually like clean. They wash the streets, and it's so weird seeing that in Spain, because they do it to such a high degree. Obviously, they don't do it everywhere, but they do it to such a high degree, and that sort of thing is the thing that does attract businesses into those areas, because actually businesses do, if they go into an area and they see that it is a nicer looking area, they are more likely to plop their business there and try to make money there. And if they do, and if the infrastructure is good, because that's another thing that could be, these sorts of federal job guarantees could be used for, then businesses also invest in those areas. There is a very strong correlation between infrastructural investment and business investment. What I'm saying is, capitalists are fucking shit at capitalism, and they should just let us do it.
Well, you're identifying the contradictions of capitalism, right? Because capitalism would say that we want to minimize labor costs to make more profit, but then they realize they've got no one to buy their products. I mean, Henry Ford actually understood this. I mean, the famous line where he said that I can't sell a product if my workers can't afford it. So he sort of understood the contradictions of capitalism. In one sense, you are making short-term profit, but in the longer run, if you've got no one buying things, less corporate profits. There's also the fact that this is more the rentier capitalism side, that landlords do benefit from benefits because you're subsidizing that as well. But largely, that's the core contradiction of capitalism. I'd love to talk about this, but it's 20 to 9. I think we should probably go to our comment section. Really good discussion on that, though. Let's bring in our producer back from holiday for 3 weeks. Callum,
hello.
How are you?
I'm all right. Yeah, I survived 3 weeks in Trump's America, so I'm now free to slag off the cunt as much as I need to, pardon my language, because I'm home. So yeah, it's great to be back, actually, and it's nice to see so many familiar names in the comments section too. So yeah, just on this story that we've just been discussing, though, I've got so much I could say about it myself. Matt Goodwin, Matt Badloss, Matt GPT, whatever name you'd like to give him today, he tweeted about a day ago about the fact that, under a reform government, it will be British welfare for British people, because they've realised, obviously, after making this announcement, that all their voters are now crapping themselves. So they have to remind their voters that, oh no, but we do still hate immigrants. We do still hate those brown people that come on the boats. And as I pointed out on Twitter, I just said, is it British welfare for British people, or is it British people won't be entitled to PIP and universal credit claimants forced into 20 hours a week of community service? Because it can't be both, right? I think it's really...
It's that famous meme, isn't it, though? It's like, immigrants are stealing everything, so once we sort out immigrants, we're going to take care of you. And then it's like, oh, please take care of me. It's like, oh, fuck off.
Yeah.
That famous. It's
Starving.
literally
Wow.
exactly what right-wing
Yeah.
politics is, isn't it?
Yeah, I do think it's really important though, and I'm sure many of our regular viewers will be aware of this already, but it's just to highlight the fact again when we're talking about the topic of personal independence payments and disability benefits. One, PIP is not an out of work benefit.
Yep.
That is something that that Leo said in big capital letters. PIP is not an out of work benefit. So this idea that cutting PIP is going to get more people back into work, actually, we know from statistics that are available that PIP actually helps people stay in work, because it means that people that maybe can't work 5 days a week can work 2.5 or 3 days a week, and then have the rest of the week to recover and recuperate with their ongoing conditions. Without the support for them for the rest of the week, they wouldn't be able to work at all. So people losing PIP would actually lead to more unemployment because it helps people stay in work. But the other thing that I've noticed around this conversation that a lot of people have been talking about online is, and the reform have kind of doubled down on, is, oh, well, we don't mean people with serious medical conditions and disabilities. We just mean those scroungers that have PIP for stupid things like anxiety and depression. And I want to remind people, and anyone that might be watching this that might listen to that and think, well, yeah, why should someone get PIP just for being a little bit anxious? PIP is also, as well as it not being an out-of-work benefit, PIP is not awarded to people because they have disabilities. PIP is not awarded to people that have, there's not a list of disabilities and illness that would qualify someone for PIP. PIP is given on the basis of how a condition actually affects your ability to survive on a day-to-day basis. You could have two people with the same illness or the same disability, and one of those people will be entitled to PIP, and one of them wouldn't even get close to being entitled to it, because it's not about the condition; it's about how the condition affects that person's ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities.
Yeah, because there's a questionnaire, isn't there, from like 0 to 7, and it's like, how much difficulty do you to do this? How much difficult is it if you do this task? Do you need help and stuff like that?
Yeah.
There's also a level of misinformation. Sorry to cut you off there, but there's a level
okay.
of misinformation going on when people say, "Oh, well, people are getting benefits for anxiety or PIP or whatever, ADHD or whatever." It's like, that's actually not true. What's happening is you've found an example of someone who is on PIP or has disability benefits for something completely irrelevant, and they also happen to have anxiety. And then they're like, oh, this person's claiming for anxiety. It's like, they're not claiming for that reason. You've just found a case study of someone who also suffers from anxiety.
Although
and that also does obviously add up to part of the reason. Like leaving the house, for example, that adds to one of the qualifiers in taking in accessing public life.
And actually, sometimes there are occasions where actually, not to contradict what you've just said, but because that is absolutely true, that very, very often they say, oh, well, it's about this, but actually, when you look at it, they've got a load of other conditions as well. But there are some people that do have anxiety, and that is their only condition that do get PIP. But their anxiety affects them in such a way that they literally cannot function on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You're not being awarded PIP simply because you've got the illness. You're being awarded it because the illness that you have affects you in such a way that you cannot get through a normal day on a regular day-to-day basis, without the anxiety or the ADHD or whatever that condition may be from significantly impacting your ability to get through said day. And it's very convenient for Reform to forget that, really. Because of course they I don't actually know what it is they're trying to achieve with this. I mean, we've shared the statistics on this stream tonight. This is going to have a massive impact on a lot of Reform voters, and it'll be very interesting to see how those voters.
I mean, I feel like they're going to have success, unfortunately, because as Ben identified, like the anti-benefits propaganda is so permeant in society that whilst even though their own constituencies are going to lose out, the majority of people would side with Reform on this really stupid idea.
We've had a few comments about this. So, for example, Flow Snake said and I'll come to the super chats in a minute. Flow Snake was saying, I was chatting to a young victim of the Reform UK Limited PSYOP in pub the other day. Quotes, people shouldn't get benefits for a bad back, although my dad's got a real bad back, so he deserves it.
Yeah.
You know, and there is this idea, isn't it, that it's it's always going to affect other people, but they don't mean us. You know,
Yeah.
You know how
they
people
don't
get
they don't
really
mean me on my pip because I'm one of the good ones. They mean
Yeah,
everybody
yeah, yeah.
else.
Yeah.
You know, people. I don't drive, right? But I'm always the passenger. I know how people get road rage. You get so angry at other drivers,
Yeah.
and it's like the lack of consideration of thinking, well, that other person's probably angry at you because when we go through life, we have the legitimate reason. If I'm late for something, I had a legitimate reason. If I've done something wrong, don't get annoyed at me. I had a legitimate reason. But I feel like people can't seem to extend that to other people and say, okay, but maybe they had a legitimate reason. Maybe they were late for a legitimate reason, etc.
Yeah.
And that is exact snapshot of that comment you said, Flo's, which is like, well, you know, my dad's got bad, but like it's the real bad stuff. But you know, these other people, they're probably faking it. It's like you've just made that up, but actually, there's millions of examples of your dad with other people who've got severe back pain. It's just really scary kind of stuff.
Mehdi Hassan has a saying that I think is just so much of our politics could be improved by. I'm not sure if he was the first one to say this, but he has a saying that the plural of anecdote is not data. Right, and I've used this when I've been on GB News before when they brought up a story, and I've been like, well, yeah, but that's one story. And if you've heard multiple stories, what you haven't got there is a data set. If you want data sets, then you have to provide that data and not freedom of information requests requested by the Center for what's that name? Center for Migration Control or whatever, like actual creditable data, that's credible data. And that is a totally different question from I heard some anecdotes and that backs up my worldview. And we just need people to be better at analyzing these things because it is a matter of future survival, like with the climate crisis and everything, that people get better at analyzing media and get better at analyzing macro politics, get better at analyzing situations as a whole instead of going, well, I have this personal experience, or someone I know has this personal experience, or someone whose friend's dog's sister's mother I know claimed benefits and got a free PS5. Right?
Anecdotes are not data. Anecdotes are just simply not data.
Rebecca's commented and said, Reform are alluding to the fact that they think that everyone who is claiming universal credit, but not limited capacity to work or limited capacity for work-related activity, is basically lazy and in their eyes just living it up. They basically consider that benefits fraud. And there are people who claim UC and aren't claiming limited capacity to work because they are able to work, and most of those people are looking for jobs. Most of the people are looking for work.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just, and you alluded to it earlier. As far as PIP's concerned, the fraud rate in PIP is so low that it is literally listed on government citations as 0%.
It's literally a rounding error. That's the thing. It's literally
so small.
It's so insignificant.
Sorry, I just want to say there is also a massive social penalty to being unemployed and being on benefits.
Yes.
It is looked down on majorly, and so there is already like a big incentive for people not to be seen as lazy, and so many people who are on welfare and depend on welfare are hyper aware that they might be seen as lazy, and so many of them are like constantly pushing back against that and trying to do good things for their community and deserve a lot of praise for like the charity work and stuff that they do with the spare time that they've got.
thing
You know?
is,
The media have concocted this fucking stupid narrative, which is that people go around and say, look at me, I'm on benefits, I'm living such a great life. But in reality, people say, what do you do for work? You say, I'm in between jobs. It's you know, I've been unemployed many times and I felt ashamed. Ridiculous. I fell for societal pressure, but I was like, I didn't really want to admit that I wasn't in work. But like that's the way people feel. The idea that people want to be on benefits is literally not the case. Most people want to be in work. Most people want to go out and just have a normal life. And those who suffer from severe disabilities that stop them from maybe they work part-time or can't work at all, You think they're laughing about it and loving it? No, they want to
And the
just have
thing
a
is
normal life
that
like everybody
the,
else.
the amount is it's a pittance. I mean, Arthur's pointed out the fact that, talking about this idea to go and force people to do 20 hours a week of work. 20 hours a week at minimum wage for people over the age of 21 is £254.20 per week. Universal credit standard allowance is £98.05 a week. Robert, shut up, is what Arthur says. So I mean, a reform. Well, it looks as though they are saying that in order for people to receive the universal credit, they are going to force them to work 20 hours a week at less than minimum wage, or a reform saying that they're going to increase universal credit to be the equivalent of 20 hours a week of minimum wage. Because I don't think they've announced that they're doing that. So the alternative is you will be forced to work for less than minimum wage.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah,
It's like
they
it's
will.
workhouses. It's literally workhouses or workfare. That's it, workfare.
It's definitely one that they need to look at clarifying on. As Actual Intrepid's pointed out as well when Robert Jenrick was speaking, as I said last night, this twat was in the government that created the current system.
Yeah.
Just to quickly, before we'll go to the super chats in a minute, and then we'll go to the first two stories. A couple of Burks sent a correction in though. I think it was something Curtis said, which was that the DWP has not allowed thousands to die. They outright have killed tens of thousands.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, the total figure of austerity was 330,000. 330,000. But I tried to get the information today to find out. But of the 330,000, how many have been estimated from benefit cuts? And there is actually no data on that. So I said thousands, more likely tens of thousands, but we don't actually have a concrete number on those who died specifically linked to benefit cuts, but we do know that 330,000 people were killed by social murder.
But if anyone wants to know or get a better understanding of how this works, go and watch I, Daniel Blake, because that is where with what reform we're proposing, we're heading back to the days where and don't get me wrong, like it's still not perfect, but it has improved a lot compared to then. But we are heading back to the days where we are going to have, like you alluded to in the story, people being fit to work who. I think there was one example of somebody that actually passed away and they were still classed as fit to work, even though they were dead.
Every politician should be forced to watch that film.
Yeah, they should be. Arthur also made a point as well that Curtis, you made the Denmark point when you're on GB News, and the response from the other side was basically, "I don't read the data," which is often the case, isn't it?
Yeah, I was debating a peer. I forget her name, but she was a Tory peer, and we were having that exact discussion about data and personal anecdotes, and she's like, I've been all around the world, I've been to loads of different countries, I know so much more than you. It's like, okay, great, I'm not really interested in your personal anecdotes, I care about data. And then she literally said, well, not all of us look at data all of the time. And I just went, and then Helena reacted to the stream, she just went, there you fucking have it, you just admitted that you don't look at data. Absolutely insane. So and yeah, shows the kind of people we're up against. But I don't care about the facts. That doesn't matter to me. That's literally who we're up against.
And those are the people.
Don't care about your facts, Curtis.
Yeah, I know, right?
And those are the people that are making the laws, and then you've got the people that are voting, who, as Jamie Ellis has pointed out, quotes, well, they're going to take away my only means that I have to feed myself, but they're also going to be mean to brown people. I'm sold.
Pretty much. Yeah. Nailed it, haven't you? Nailed it.
Super chats. Len McBain, welcome. £2 super chat. So tired. So tired, says Len McBain.
Ben been gifting his own organisation.
That's because of Len's. Well, that's because of Len's, really long day. That was probably Ben's in reverse. You started the day with a live stream, then you went to work, and then you finished it with some karate or something. Just to.
It is odd though that you contribute to your own organisation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird.
And when Google take the cut, you're literally making less money off of it.
Dominique's gifted 5 turn left memberships. Thank you for those, and welcome to all those new members. And Len McBain sent another £2 and says, taught Ben all he knows about the triple arm lock.
What's a triple arm lock? Okay, carry on. Sorry.
It's a triple lock ref,
yeah,
isn't it?
it's a reference to the triple lock and the jiu-jitsu, I think, in both.
I mean, that's a Jim speak kind of comment, though.
Yeah. Right, sorry.
It's a Jim speak kind of comment. I'll just say that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, who's been very quiet tonight? Actually, is that because he's logged in?
Well, it's hard to do multiple devices at once, isn't it?
We'll find out who you are one day, Len. Yeah. So. Obviously, going back to the first two stories of the night, and it's I mean it's horrific. As I've said earlier, I've been out of the country for the last few weeks, and I'd sort of vaguely seen this story, but I wasn't sort of fully over the detail of it. In fact, I've mostly caught up actually whilst producing the show tonight. Hearing our own coverage of it, and it's just horrific, isn't it? It feels like Caroline Flack all over again. It's like another situation where the media have just found an individual that they've hounded and hounded and hounded to the point of death, and I've just got no words. It's just appalling. So some of the things that people have said about it, I mean, where to start, because there's quite a lot. We've got this one from Andrew Luke, who said, like the British press knows anything about academia, they know plenty about plagiarism, ripping off one another in the Dr. Arday pylon.
Yep.
Which is
they also hate academia, by the way, and so does Confus. These are people who fucking hate academia, because academia gives people the critical skills that they need to pull apart the press's narratives. I'll never forget when I was in sixth form, somebody who I knew had started doing media studies because it had just become available in our sixth form at the time. And I remember talking to them about, I'd spoken to them about politics previously. And she went to me and she was like, yeah, so we've been looking at Daily Mail articles and they're genuinely like children wrote them. Oh my God, I can't believe the amount of like shit and unverified stuff that just comes out of that particular paper. And I was like, yeah, I have, I didn't say this, but I was thinking, kind of been telling you this for a while. This is,
Yeah. Universe Girl has said, even if he didn't plagiarize, like, I really don't care either way. He's such a lesser evil at this point. If he did, like, I know lawyers who do worse.
Yeah, literally.
It was a 1 day story at best. I think it was largely. I said this on Twitter the other day. I was like, it's largely an internal affairs issue, right? Let Cambridge deal with it. I can see it being in the media for a day because obviously Cambridge is prestigious. There is some kind of authority being a professor, but 4 weeks coverage is absolutely insane. In fact, look, we didn't talk about this, right? Turnef never covered this story. I made a personal video on this account on the weekend after he died, but had he not died, honestly, we may have not talked about it, because I personally thought, I don't know much about Jason Arday, and I never thought it was a topic that was important enough to talk about, because it was like, oh, some professor had maybe lied about something. Why is this a big deal? And in fact, like, those of us on the left got dragged into it because the right wing made such a big deal out of it, then invoked the DEI wokeness nonsense. Like, so I wasn't particularly interested in that story, and that's why Turn Left never actually covered the original claims of plagiarism, all that sort of stuff, because it just wasn't a story that I think was worth talking about.
Can I ask about this thing, because you know what I'm like when I'm producing. If there's a comment that's criticizing us or whatever, I'll always try and find it and throw it in there first.
Yeah,
sure, go for
balance. And we've had this one from Kayed Asayed, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, info3330, who said, you're recreating the conditions of Arday's death by coping for the DEI academic establishment which enabled his fanaticism. Now, there have been other broadcasters, streamers, outlets like ours that have been criticised for their coverage, but that extends to over the last few weeks prior to Arday's death. But what do you say to this comment, and when is it appropriate to talk about this story versus when is it just jumping on the bandwagon and contributing to the conditions that led to his death?
I'm going to take the comment head on, because I think to be honest, it looks like he's come from a right-wing perspective here, which is that you're coping for the DEI academic establishment. To be honest, I would like to explain what you mean by that, because that just seems like a bunch of buzzwords. First of all, we do not have DEI in this country. It's EDI. So you can't really have a discussion on this if you don't know what you're talking about, okay? We have EDI. And the biggest proponent or the biggest beneficiary of EDI is white women. Okay, it's white women. So first of all, you're using the wrong term, but also racism and EDI shouldn't really be discussed in the same sentence, given that it's been for white women. They have been the biggest beneficiaries of it. I don't know what you mean by DEI academic establishment. Look, the way, and Ben, I definitely want you to come on this as well, but the way I see the establishment, right? What is the establishment? The right-wing idea of the establishment is what Matt Goodwin says is the new elite, the liberal establishment, which is progressives, it's school teachers apparently, or university graduates and academia, because he is a social conservative and doesn't like the fact that society has moved on and that we've become socially more progressive, right? A consensus is not the same as the establishment. So, for example, thankfully, we have equal marriage in this country, right? But once upon a time, two men couldn't get married. Now, because we've overcome that and now two men can get married, is it now establishment to be queer friendly? No. The consensus has changed, but conservatism is still very much establishment. Conservatism, social and economic conservatism, is still, has a lot of influence in society. So to me, the establishment is the financial and political elite, those that yield more power. So I'm talking about the multimillionaires and the billionaires. I'm talking about the corporations. I'm talking about the trillionaires. I'm talking about the press. I'm talking about the politicians who serve the multimillionaires and billionaires. They are the establishment. And guess what? They're not so progressive. And anytime you do see progressivism in so-called establishment forces, what you're seeing there, in which the left wing have a huge critique of, is liberal capitalism or woke capitalism or rainbow capitalism. So for example, Target putting up rainbow flags in their stores doesn't mean that progressivism and queerness is now the establishment. What it means is Target did some field research and thought, oh, we could probably make some more money if we're a bit more queer friendly because we've become more accepting in society. But it doesn't do anything about queer people. It doesn't want to increase wages, which also benefits queer people, does it? And guess what? The woke capitalist agenda, right? That has gone just as quick as it arrived. Now people, it seems like the debate is becoming more conservative. Now you're seeing these tech bros push out the most conservative slop. You're seeing big old streamers push out conservatism. So that to me is what the establishment is. I don't know what you mean by DEI academic establishment. Finally, look, yes, Cambridge obviously has some bit responsibility due to safeguarding. Maybe they could have done a better job with him because there was, they knew about problems of his mental health beforehand. But ultimately, it wasn't DEI that killed him. It was the media pylon. He even said, Jason Arday, he said, I've had enough. Please stop. And since then, they published another 150 fucking articles.
Yeah, I want to give an analogy. Like, if let's say Curtis was regularly feeling like low energy and needed that little caffeine boost when he did a show, and he had sugar in his tea as well. Let's say it was tea he was getting for the caffeine boost, and you were going, it's kind of bad to drink that much tea. Probably a bad idea to drink that much tea. Let's say I was doing it. Let's say I was saying, it's bad for you to drink that much tea, Curtis. And then one day I slipped some. I'm visiting Salisbury Cathedral for the day, and I slipped some Novichok in Curtis's tea, and Curtis drinks the tea, and he passes away, and then I'm like, see, I told you that tea was bad for you. This is what the right wing do all the fucking time, and it's so ridiculous. It's such a whingy point. When they don't get their own way, they create a storm. The consequences of that storm then hurt people, and then they go, well, you hurt those people because you were drinking the tea, because you were doing the thing that I didn't like in the first place, and therefore it's your fault. No, motherfucker, it's not our fault. It's correcting historical injustices is not what causes division. People like you fucking cause division. Do not come here with your bullshit telling us that it's the same as fucking Young Bob. I remember Young Bob filming the. I ran into him on a TikTok live of all places the other day when I was on a TikTok live, and he was filming the riots a little while ago where people were like rolling bins at the police, and he was saying this is the result of mass migration, and it's like, have some fucking self-awareness, bro. What are you talking about? This is the result of your ideology, not ours. Like, the backlash to justice is not the fault of justice. Like, that's not the way that works. And we need to start calling these people out for the fucking bullshit as they are. I'm sorry, I don't want to take away from the other comments about Jason Arday, because this is a really big and really important story, particularly for Black Britons and Black academics. So I'm going to just leave it at that. But just, yeah.
I think it's fair to say that we have absolutely seen that sort of behaviour from the right, though, particularly around this story too. So I think that the analogy you used there was useful in highlighting that. In terms of the number of articles and the amount of just harassment that went on in the media, Arthur Bumblefoot's pointed out it's not just the 200 plus articles. There was literally hours of discussion on TV and radio. The whole of the British press was focused on this story for about 3 weeks when it should have lasted one day.
And not just the quantity, the type of stories. Again, I'm not adverse to any sort of scrutiny, but there were articles which were like, it was drama. You know, they were pulling up associations, some of his friends and stuff like that. They were talking about how many fucking marathons he did or how long he, like this sort of crap, right? It wasn't even like 200 properly scrutinized articles. It was there was the sort of coverage.
And sorry to interrupt you, Curtis, but Carol Cadwalla tweeted a day ago. She said, "I think this has probably shocked me more than anything else. The Times ran multiple ads trashing Jason Arday. Paid ads. This one reached, she screenshotted one, and she said this one reached 195,746 people and ran until August the 16th, which was today, as of the day of her tweet, which was yesterday. So this ad was running yesterday.
Did they do paid ads for Jeffrey Epstein? Prince Andrew. In fact, I distinctly remember there's an article defending Prince Andrew.
She said there's a rearguard action to defend journalism, but this isn't journalism. It's monetized race bait. And you know what the story was? It was the Times said a woman taught by the academics said she learnt nothing of substance and was accused of white privilege when she challenged him. Like that was the fucking story, the quote unquote story that the Times and Sunday Times were putting out as a paid ad up until yesterday. It's insane.
They didn't even stop the paid ad when he died. That's how fucking callous.
Exactly. I just want to highlight this one as well. We should probably wrap up on comments, but I'll make no comment on this. But Andrew Lucas just said, Hartley Brewer, Talk Radio, Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. till 1 p.m. Coordinated phone-in is called for.
I will. Go call her up and tell her her comment was disgusting. Make complaints about her. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not inciting harassment. I'm saying politely, call up the show and say I thought your comment was wrong. Fuck it. And if she sees this show, you want to send commenters to our show? Brilliant. Give us more fucking views.
Let's go.
I despise that woman. I think she's
are you offering
disgusting person.
Are you offering to go on if Talk TV invite you? Yeah.
I'll go on head to head with her, and I'll make sure I never invite her back again because I will literally spend 5 minutes just haranguing her as a human being. I don't care. I genuinely despise this woman because she's so disgusting. Absolutely disgusting person.
Yeah. I love seeing that from the left, by the way. The right response, which should be, these people are fucking disgusting. We need, and it's one of the things that I think we do quite well here at Turn Left is just have this kind of reaction of this is how a normal person should react to these fucking freaks. Whilst also calling out the monetary incentives for Julia Hartley Brewer to act like that, because she makes a lot of money acting like it, you know.
I think we should leave it there for the comments, unless there's anything else.
Have you done super chats, by the way?
Yes, we did those.
Okay, cool, brilliant.
It was mostly Len Mclaine today, which we appreciate. Thank you, Len.
Thanks, Len.
All right. Well, that was a fantastic show. It's 9:10. I think it was always going to go over because really long discussions, particularly in the case of Jason Arday. Obviously, thank you, Callum, for juicing. Ben, it was a good show, wasn't it?
Yeah. And thanks for hosting. It's a difficult topic to talk about. It really is, especially for us on the left, because there's so much in terms of us in media feeling somewhat responsible, and people in similar positions to us feeling somewhat responsible for either having covered stuff too much or not covered stuff, or because one of my first thoughts was like, oh, should we have pushed back against the media narrative more? It's such a difficult thing to talk about, so I appreciate you hosting in the way that you've done and the facts that you brought up. You're always brilliant, but particularly tonight, I think it's worth saying that I really appreciate the way that you've covered this. I think you've done really well.
Yeah, and of course, thank you for your comments, because your comments were brilliant analysis, brilliant commentary, as always, though, but in particular in this story. Now, of course, thank you, Ben, for joining me tonight. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Remember, you can support us by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to a one-off donation, or there is a link to our Patreon, which is, I think, about £3 a month. The minimum is £3 a month. You can become a YouTube member for 99p. If you can't afford to give us the money, that's absolutely fine. Please just share our content, whether it's liking a stream or it's clipping us. And, you know, we encourage you to make your own TikTok, turn left, clip channels, whatever. Clip us and do it on TikTok. Keep the revenue. The same for Instagram. Do it on Twitter, and also in real life, offline. Tell people about Turn Left. If you're speaking to people who are angry at the political establishment and the oligarchical media, but feel like there isn't something that really vibes to them, tell them about Turn Left. Really important. Of course, remember, we go live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7:30 p.m. You've been watching Normal Ireland's Live. I'm Curtis Daly. Before we leave you, for all of the discussion around Jason Arday, I think it's best that you don't hear from us or other journalists right now on this, but we close out with Arday's own words.
If you could change the world in any way, how would you change it?
I would take a thread and a needle and I'd interweave love into our society. That's what I would do. I think the absence of love in our society is absolutely palpable. I feel like the empathy we have for one another, the tolerance that we have for one another, it's completely eroded, you know, and there is so much anger in society. There's so much anger in society, and I often think, what would one replace that with? Because also, that anger's become inflicted. You know, we're not kind of driven towards one goal, we're kind of turning on one another. And so for me, the thing that I would do, if I could change the world, I would have the world and I'd have it spinning on this axis of love. That's what I'd have. Because we've lost, as a society, in my humble opinion, I think we've lost our way. And I think